Here's more of the Alice Stewart Show on 96.5 The Voice.
Welcome back to the Alice Stewart Show. 18 minutes after 7 o'clock and 18 days until the midterm elections. And we had a busy week of debates with the major candidates this week. And last night, there was a debate between the candidates for lieutenant governor and governor. And this hour, we're joined with three of the candidates right now in studio. Democratic lieutenant governor candidate John Burkhalter joins us. John, great to have you here.
Thank you, Alice. My wife, Penny, says to say hello. She spent yesterday afternoon at the state fair with my daughters, and my daughters and my wife were with me at the debate yesterday, but she wanted to be sure.
That's great. Well, tell her I said hi, and that's quite a day for your girls being in a probably not super exciting for young folks debate and then going to the state fair.
Oh, yes. I told them the rules were we take the phones away before we go in. As we know, so many of our young people, they spend so much time on their smartphones, but it was a great day, and I'm very glad they got to come.
It was a good debate between you and the other candidates for lieutenant governor. And your focus, you starting off talking about your background and your experience in your background, working hard, getting an education with engineering, focusing on engineering, and telling your background, which I thought was important to do. A lot of folks kind of may have been tuning out throughout this process, and now it's time for you to tell your story on where you are and why jobs and a trained, skilled workforce is so important.
And I would like to tell my story as quickly as I can, because one of the things I'm concerned about in this country is we do not need to vilify people who have become successful. We need to instill work ethic and honesty and hard work in our children so they can become successful in life. But I grew up in Sylvan Hills, north of the river here in central Arkansas. My mother and father worked full-time to make sure my four sisters and I got a chance to go to college. We all got that chance, and we all graduated from college. I went to Hendrix College in Conway and then on the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, where I earned a degree in civil engineering. After that, I moved to Little Rock, worked for a small engineering company, and really didn't know if I would ever have a company. My dreams really weren't that I would own a company. During that time, I became a registered professional engineer, and I began to develop technologies that I wanted to advance. So I went to most all the banks in central Arkansas, and this is kind of the sad part about our country right now is I came from a family of no political influence or money, and folks, I couldn't get a loan. So I remortgaged my home, bought a used Suburban, and began to use my credit cards to build a business. Now, the first 2 years were very humble because I couldn't afford the equipment. My process is relined underground sewer line pipes. And Alice, this might be the part that you don't really want to hear very much, but I didn't. When a municipality asked me to reline a sewer line, it was full of sewage. It had to be removed, and I didn't have the $250,000 truck to remove the sewage. So I took an old boat trailer from my father, put plywood on the bottom and the sides, and lined it with plastic so it wouldn't leak. And we would enter these manholes. Some would be 20, 25 feet deep. We used a 5-gallon plastic paint bucket on a ski rope with an ice scoop in my hand. We removed the sewage for 2 years this way because I didn't have the equipment. We would then take that boat trailer to the sewer treatment plant and use rakes and rake the sewage off. But after 2 years, I earned an SBA loan. My company grew to over 25 states and hundreds of employees, and I lived the American dream. I lived the Arkansas dream.
I think that experience right there, what you just painted, that experience dealing with sewage would give you the experience necessary to provide over the Senate if as lieutenant governor.
I think I will be prepared to deal with most any. I've dealt with very tough situations. Throughout my career, I've protected my family, I've protected my employees, and I've protected my companies, and I look forward to protecting the state of Arkansas and its citizens.
And one of the a key topic that came up quite often in the debate, obviously, job creation, and creating an environment for businesses to grow. That's something that you would focus on. You've served on the Economic Development Commission, which is important, and it's about having a jobs plan and creating a trained, skilled workforce here in Arkansas.
Yeah, I am the jobs guy in this race. I'm really the only one that's ever made a payroll, anyone that's ever started a business, grown a business, or really recruited a business to Arkansas. I've traveled the state over the last year, and I've listened to small businesses. I've listened to employers, employees, big business, And everyone talks about a trained, skilled workforce, and it is what I know. And it starts early. We've got to start with our children. I think every 4-year-old in the state should have a chance to go to pre-K. It's a proven fact that if they get a chance to go to pre-K, they're more likely to graduate from high school and go on and be successful in life. When a child gets into junior high and high school, we need more career coaches and also what I call counselors. Children need to know they need a direction. Only 20 children that reach the 9th grade. Out of 100 that reach the 9th grade, only 20 will graduate from college. We've got to get our people understanding that there's other ways to go. And I'm talking about VOTEC, Career Tech. I remember when I was going to Fayetteville, I was one of the last classes that had to use a slide rule. And we wore those slide rules on our belt. And it wasn't cool to be an engineer when I was at Fayetteville. And it's cool to be an engineer now. Engineers make a lot of money, and it needs to be cool to be a welder, a pipe fitter, a plumber. And I want to make sure that children have options, and by the time they get into high school, that we have VOTEC programs in the afternoon where they can learn to be a welder and a plumber so that when they graduate from high school, they have the certificates so they can go to work and make a good wage.
And one of the things that came up, my guest, John Burkhalter, who is a Democrat candidate for lieutenant governor, is your challenger, a Republican, Tim Griffin, said that there could possibly be a conflict of interest with the business ventures you have out there now. If you were to serve as lieutenant governor, that it would be a conflict of interest. You say you'd be full-time lieutenant governor, and that's key in terms of running that office. But doing that with your business interests, Congressman Griffin says that's a conflict.
Well, Congressman Griffin is losing in this race. He's been behind for weeks. He's got to say something negative. I want to stay the positive in my race. I've prepared to run for office a couple of years. Governor Beebe a couple of years ago began to talk to me about running for office, and I told Governor Beebe I didn't grow up to be a candidate. I didn't grow up to run in a political race, and he said, John, you've got too much to offer your state. So I made the decision. I'm an Eagle Scout. I'm always prepared. 2 years ago, I began to hire additional people. I've added onto my building. I've added more layers of overhead to be prepared because my businesses are going to continue. I employ a lot of Arkansans. It's important to our economy, and I will be a full-time lieutenant governor. And so since I'm going to be working full-time to my state, I wanted to make sure I made the provisions that my companies continued and there weren't any conflicts. I've not been to Washington. I haven't spent my career in Washington, D.C. I'm a problem solver, not a person that likes to create problems and talk about other people.
And you had mentioned last night is that you are running against a career politician who's gone from one job to the next. You're a businessman, needs to focus on human capital. And Congressman Griffin will be on shortly. But his response to that is he was an elected official for 3.5 years. But your contention is he's a career politician.
He spent about the last 2 decades in Washington. He was an opposition researcher for years, trying to destroy people's lives with that information. He worked in multiple political positions. He spent his whole career up there. Just because he says he owns a house here doesn't mean that he is here. And he's taken a political paycheck for almost 20 years. I have a command of the King's English, but just go to the dictionary and look up politician and you'll see that that's what he is.
And his response last night, he says, only in a Burkhalter Obama economy is 4 years a career politician. So there was an attempt there to link you with Barack Obama.
He, as I said, he just wants to talk about Washington. And the people of Arkansas are concerned about Arkansas. I talk about Arkansas, and I really want to talk about Arkansas because we're competing with the states around us. We're competing with the world. What I hear from people around the state of Arkansas, they are so tired of these career Washington politicians talking about Washington. They don't get anything done. They're divisive. What people tell me is I want to make sure my town survives. I want to make sure I have a job. I want to make sure my grandchildren and children get an education in the state of Arkansas, and that's what I'm focused on. They need to leave that divisive politics, and Tim Griffin, if that's what he wants to talk about, that's what he wants to do, he just needs to stay in Washington, D.C.
And one of the roles, we've got about a minute and a half left, one of the roles as lieutenant governor is presiding over the Senate. More than likely that will be Republican-controlled House and Senate here in Arkansas. How will you go about that role as a Democrat working across the aisle?
Alice, my entire life I've been building organizations, putting them together. I was on the UA Board of Advisors. I was on the Pathfinder Board. I was on the Highway Commission. I was on the Economic Development Commission. I was on the Hospital Board. I was the honorary commander for the 314th in Jacksonville. I was on the Jacksonville Little Rock Air Force Base Community Council. I have been pulling people together my whole life. I never asked them what political affiliation they were. Tim Griffin always wants to talk about politics. I have friends on both sides of the aisle. I'm not going to demand respect. I've always earned it. I'm excited about the future, and I'm going to continue building my relationships just as I have in my private life.
All right. John Burkhalter, Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor. If you have questions, you want more information about him, you can go to johnburkhalter.com. John, thanks so much for coming in. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Alice.
18 days to go.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Make sure that you have all of your voter information up to date, and early voting starts next week and 18 days until Election Day. We're going to take a break. When we come back, challenger for John Burkhalter, Congressman Tim Griffin, joins us after this break, and then Asa Hutchinson, the Republican gubernatorial candidate, joins us. So stick around right here on the Alice Stewart Show.